They say the universe always finds a way to set things back into place, even when everything seems lost. And that's exactly what happened to her. She was on the edge of bankruptcy, watching her business fall apart, the bills stacking up, and her faith fading a little more each day. Until one simple encounter, on an ordinary morning, changed the entire direction of her life. She was walking through a small neighborhood market, just trying to distract her mind from the weight she was carrying, when an older woman approached her. There was a calmness in that woman's eyes that couldn't be explained, and in her hands, she held a brown-covered journal. She handed it to her with a gentle smile and said only, "Gratitude is the miracle that keeps the universe in motion." She didn't understand it at first. A journal? What difference could that possibly make in the middle of the chaos her life had become? But something in those words echoed deep inside her, as if the universe itself had just whispered directly to her heart. In that moment, the sound of the market seemed to fade. A soft breeze lifted the blank pages, as if saying, "Here is your new beginning." And for the first time in a long time, she felt hope. But before that day, her life had been collapsing. She could hardly sleep. The phone rang only with demands and debts. Doors that once opened easily now felt permanently shut. Everything she believed was stable had crumbled all at once, and what remained was fear, the fear of not being able to stand again, the fear of no longer believing in herself. Because this is where the real story begins. Before the encounter. Before the journal. Before she discovered the power of gratitude. Sometimes, life has to strip away everything, so the universe can return what truly matters. In the days before that morning, she woke up with a weight pressing on her chest. The routine that once brought purpose now felt heavy and exhausting. Her messages were no longer new orders, but reminders of overdue bills. The silence in her office echoed the emptiness inside her, of someone trying to keep alive something that had already fallen apart on the inside. Clients disappeared. Employees left. Promises of new contracts faded. She tried to smile, but inside, the panic was growing. Every glance at the spreadsheet made the ground seem to disappear. There was no abundance left, only lack. Lack of money, lack of direction, lack of faith. And when she looked in the mirror, she no longer saw the strong woman she once knew. She saw tired eyes, sleepless nights, and a heart that didn't know where to find strength anymore. Everything she had built was collapsing before her, and there was no one there to catch her when she fell. As if you were fighting against time, trying to hold on to something that keeps slipping through your fingers. If this part of her story speaks to you, comment the word reborn, because that's what this story is about, beginning again, choosing faith, and allowing transformation. And take a moment to subscribe and share this video with someone who needs to remember that life can turn around at any moment. Sometimes, change starts exactly at the moment we think everything is over. What she didn't know yet was that the universe was already moving on her behalf. Before everything fell apart, life seemed perfect. Her business was growing fast, new contracts were coming in one after another, and her schedule was constantly full. The phone never stopped ringing, meetings filled her days, and every goal achieved felt like proof that success was solid, unshakable. She took pride in seeing her name on reports, in being respected by clients and partners. Everything suggested that this would be the best year of her life. The hallways of the company smelled like coffee and urgency. People coming and going, deals being closed, a shared atmosphere of progress and victory. She believed her effort was finally being rewarded. She spoke with excitement in meetings, planned new directions, dreamed big, and told herself she had finally reached stability. Inside, there was a quiet sense of fulfillment. Not just because of the money, but because of what success represented: safety, recognition, freedom. She remembered the years of struggle, the late nights working while everyone else slept, and now she was watching the results bloom right in front of her. There was a business partner, someone she trusted completely. Together, they were a perfect balance. She was heart and vision, he was structure and numbers. Decisions were quick. Wins were shared. It felt like nothing could possibly go wrong. But the universe has its own timing. And sometimes, when life feels completely under control, that's exactly when we're asked to learn how to let go. The feeling of security can be an illusion, and life has a way of reminding us of that when we least expect it. The next few months seemed even more promising. Goals were being surpassed, and each accomplishment reinforced the belief that nothing could shift or break. She truly believed she had overcome every challenge. But behind the fast pace, the celebrations, and the confident smiles, something quiet and subtle was beginning to shift, like the tide pulling back before a great wave. There were warning signs she chose not to see. A delayed payment. A partner avoiding eye contact. A contract delayed without explanation. Small things that meant nothing on their own, but together, they were the beginning of a storm that would change everything. She didn't know it then, but that would be her last season of peace before a long and difficult winter. At first, it was just small delays that seemed normal in any business. A supplier who didn't get paid on time. A client who pushed the deadline. A meeting that was cancelled at the last minute. Nothing that looked serious, just the natural rhythm of work, she told herself. But slowly, the harmony in the office began to fade. Her partner's confident smile was no longer the same, and the light in his eyes had been replaced by a restless uneasiness she couldn't quite explain. She began to notice small changes. Invoices that didn't match. Numbers missing from reports. Financial movements happening without her approval. She tried to convince herself she was overreacting, that it was just stress, but her instinct was screaming that something was wrong. The sense of safety that once held her together began to crumble. Meetings became cold. The partner who once shared dreams and ideas now avoided conversations. Always in a hurry, always with vague excuses, promising to fix everything next week. And every time she insisted on reviewing the numbers, he would divert the conversation with polished optimism. "Trust me," he said, wearing a smile that no longer reached his eyes. But time, the silent witness, eventually revealed what words tried to hide. A phone call from an old client brought the first crack in the illusion. He had discovered that her partner was secretly closing deals behind her back, channeling money away from the company. The ground disappeared. The world seemed to move in slow motion, as if the reality she knew was shattering right in front of her. That call was the beginning of the collapse. What followed was a chain of losses, clients canceling contracts, debts appearing from nowhere, and a bitter taste of betrayal that was heavier than any financial downfall. She kept asking herself where she went wrong. How did she not see it? How did she miss the signs? The days that came after were filled with silence. The office that once buzzed with life became hollow and still. The ringing phone no longer meant opportunity, it echoed like a reminder of everything that was slipping away. What once felt like a source of pride now looked like a castle of sand being washed away by the tide of disappointment. The broken trust didn't only hurt her finances, it hurt her soul. It wasn't just the collapse of a business. It was the collapse of a dream, a partnership, and her faith in herself. But the universe, even when it seems to tear everything down, is often clearing space for something new. The days that followed felt like sinking into a heavy, suffocating silence. The office, once full of movement, now felt like an abandoned room lit only by cold screen light and stacks of papers that no longer held meaning. The plants in the corner began to wilt. The framed photos on the walls lost their color. Even the coffee tasted bitter. The space itself seemed to mirror the chaos she carried inside. Messages demanding payment began to arrive one after the other, each more urgent than the last. The banks didn't want explanations. The creditors didn't want stories. The money was gone, and with it, the trust of the people around her. Old clients stepped away. The few who remained began to question whether she could keep going. The weight of failure spread like a slow shadow, steady, constant, unavoidable. She still tried to resist. She sold her car, cut expenses, let go of part of her team. She started doing everything alone, reviewing contracts late into the night, like someone trying to hold back a broken dam with her bare hands. But the harder she tried to control everything, the more life slipped away through her fingers. The nights became painfully long. The pillow, damp with tears, became her only confidant. There were days when she didn't have the strength to get up, yet she did anyway, driven by a thin, irrational thread of hope that maybe, just maybe, something could still change. Her body moved, but her soul was exhausted. She kept asking herself where she had lost her way. She remembered the years of effort, the nights working while the world slept, the energy she poured into every detail. It was hard to accept that all of that had led her here. What once brought pride now felt like shame. What was once certainty had turned into fear. But there was one thing time still hadn't taken from her, the desire to understand why. Why did everything fall apart? Why did the universe allow it? And more importantly, how do you start again when even your faith feels like it collapsed with everything else? She didn't know yet, but those questions would be the seeds of a new journey. Because it's always in the emptiness that the universe finds space to plant something new. Then came the day she simply couldn't get up. The alarm rang, but her body didn't move. The clock showed 9 in the morning, and for the first time in years, she let time pass without resistance. She stayed there, staring at the blank white ceiling, feeling the weight of her own breathing. It was as if the world had stopped, and inside the silence there was only one question: what now? The phone kept ringing in the other room, but she didn't answer. She already knew it would be another collection call, another voice reminding her of how much she had lost. The pride that once lifted her chin now only made the fall feel heavier. Yesterday's success felt like a distant dream, and the future like an empty road without direction. The bills piled up on the table, and the dreams piled up inside her chest. She had lost almost everything: the money, the business, the trust, and the peace. Close friends drifted away quietly, some because they didn't know what to say, others because they were afraid of seeing themselves reflected in her collapse. What remained was the echo of loneliness, a companion she never chose, but one that seemed to have moved in. The nights were the hardest. She closed her eyes and saw her mistakes playing like scenes from a film she couldn't stop watching. She tried to understand where she went wrong, but nothing made sense. Some nights, she thought about giving up entirely. Other nights, she simply cried until her body gave in to sleep. But beneath the despair, something subtle began to shift, quietly, almost invisible. Between one tear and the next, she felt a small, fragile urge to speak to something greater. Not with rehearsed words. Just with the rawness of her heart. She began talking to herself, or maybe to the universe, saying everything she felt, as if she were writing letters that would never be sent. And in one of those silent mornings, she heard herself whisper, "If there is a reason for all of this, show me." And for the first time in a very long time, she felt a small breath of peace move through the room. She didn't know it yet, but in that exact moment, the universe began to shift. Not with noise. Not with warnings. But with the quiet, patient movement of something extraordinary being prepared. After that night, something inside her began to shift, even if slowly. It wasn't a sudden or magical change, but a quiet awakening. For the first time in months, she opened the windows and let the sunlight in. The morning air had a different scent, the scent of a beginning, even though nothing around her had actually changed. Her body was still tired, the bills were still there, but there was a new lightness in the atmosphere, as if the universe had heard her request and was now, little by little, answering. She began walking through her neighborhood again, without any particular destination, just to breathe. The sound of traffic, the smell of fresh bread coming from the bakery, the voices of people passing by, everything seemed to carry a different meaning now. It was as if, within the simple notes of everyday life, the world was trying to remind her that beauty still existed. That life hadn't ended, it had only changed shape. During those walks, she started to notice small signs. A book left on a bench with the word hope underlined. A child waving at her from across the street with a smile that felt like sunlight. A bird landing on her window railing at the exact moment she was thinking about giving up. Small things, but somehow, they carried messages. And it was on one of those mornings, as she returned from one of those quiet walks, that she decided to visit the neighborhood market, something she hadn't done in months. She only wanted to see people again, feel movement around her, remember what it felt like to be part of life instead of watching it from a distance. The sound of voices, the colors of the fruit stands, the perfume of flowers, everything seemed more alive than before. As she walked slowly, observing the stalls, a woman approached her. She had a serenity in her expression, the kind of peace that comes with time, experience, and a heart that has learned to understand life. The woman looked at her for a moment and smiled, as if she recognized her, not from memory, but from destiny. Before she could speak, the woman extended a brown-covered journal and said, in a calm and gentle voice, "Gratitude is the miracle that keeps the universe in motion." For a moment, everything stopped. The noise of the market faded, the breeze passed softly, and she felt as if that sentence had traveled a long distance just to reach her. The woman smiled once more and disappeared among the stalls, blending into the crowd as if she had never been there. She stood still, holding the journal tightly, her heart beating fast. She didn't know who that woman was or why this had happened, but deep inside, she felt that her life had just shifted direction. That night, the journal rested on the table, still closed. She looked at it with a kind of reverence, sensing that there was something inside it beyond blank pages. Hours passed before she finally had the courage to open it. The first pages were empty, but toward the center, she found a sentence written by hand, in gentle, steady strokes. "Gratitude is the miracle that keeps the universe in motion." She read it again, and again, and again, until the words echoed inside her. It felt like the universe had answered her, not with explanations, but with a key. A key not just to unlock hope, but to open a new future. She turned the pages, and the next ones carried short, simple reminders, almost like whispers meant only for her. Think of what you desire, but feel it as if it's already real. The universe responds to the vibration of your heart, not the desperation of your mind. Believe, even when everything around you says otherwise. As she read, a strange feeling washed over her. It wasn't excitement, and it wasn't fear, it was something deeper, almost like remembering something she had always known but had forgotten along the way. For the first time, she understood that life doesn't change just when we want it to change, but when we feel truthfully what we desire. Those pages spoke about the power of thought, emotion, and action. About how the universe doesn't give us what we ask for, but what we vibrate. And the more she read, the more she realized how far she had drifted from that truth. The fear, the anger, the guilt, everything she had been feeling, were vibrations that kept scarcity alive inside her. She closed the journal and exhaled slowly. It was too simple to ignore, and too powerful to be a coincidence. She understood that if she wanted her reality to change, she would have to change what was happening within her. That very night, before going to sleep, she wrote her first words inside the journal. "I am grateful for everything I have lived, because every loss has brought me to this moment." And for the first time in a long time, she fell asleep in peace. In the days that followed, the journal became a silent companion. Every morning, before checking her phone, she opened it and wrote down 3 things she was grateful for, even if they didn't make sense yet. At first, the words felt forced, as if her mind resisted the idea of seeing anything good in the middle of chaos. But little by little, the practice turned into a ritual. She began to understand that gratitude wasn't just a feeling, it was a choice. It was choosing to look at life and see what remains, not only what has been lost. Each sentence she wrote felt like a spark being reignited inside her. I am grateful to still be here. I am grateful for the strength to begin again. I am grateful because the universe hasn't given up on me. These simple sentences began to shift the tone of her days. What used to be despair slowly became calm. What used to be fear became curiosity. And the more she wrote, the more she noticed life responding. At first, it came in subtle ways. An old client called just to say thank you for a job she did long ago. A supplier offered help without expecting anything in return. A payment appeared in her account on the exact day she had no idea how she would cover her bills. Small miracles, quiet, but enough to reignite faith. She also began putting into practice what she had learned about the law of attraction. She stopped complaining and started appreciating. She stopped asking, why is this happening to me, and began asking, what is this trying to teach me? She discovered that energy changes when the mind changes, and that the universe doesn't deliver what we want, it responds to what we are. With time, this new inner perspective began to reflect in her actions. She reorganized the office, cleared her desk, threw away old papers, and opened space for the new. Every gesture felt symbolic, as if she were saying to the universe, I am ready to begin again. And the universe responded. Not with one grand, miraculous moment, but with steady signs, gentle confirmations that the transformation had already begun. The first sign came when she no longer expected anything at all. It was a quiet afternoon, one of those moments when silence feels heavier than sound. Sunlight streamed through the window, touching the open pages of the journal, and the breeze moved the curtains in a slow, gentle rhythm. She didn't have any grand plans that day. She only wanted to keep her mind calm, continue writing her gratitude entries, and remind herself that the universe still knew what it was doing. As she was going through old emails, her phone buzzed. It was a message, unexpected, almost unbelievable. A former client who had disappeared when everything collapsed wrote, I saw a post of yours and remembered how impeccable your work always was. Are you still taking clients? The words were simple, but the impact was profound. She felt her heart quicken, as if a part of her that had been asleep suddenly opened its eyes again. She answered with her usual professionalism, but inside, a quiet joy began to unfold. The contract that followed wasn't large, but it meant far more than money. It marked the beginning of a new chapter. It was as if the universe was whispering, you understood the lesson. Now, begin again. For the first time in a long time, she felt movement, not because the world around her had changed, but because she had. In the days that followed, new surprises arrived, a sequence of small synchronicities that felt impossible to ignore. A supplier called offering better terms. A former employee reached out to thank her for everything she had learned and then offered to help. An old invoice she had completely given up on was suddenly paid. And all of this happened in less than a week. She began to understand that this wasn't coincidence, it was vibrational response. The universe doesn't deliver what we beg for in fear, but what we embody with truth. The journal was never a magic object, it was an extension of her new inner state. The words she wrote changed the frequency of her heart, and that frequency began to draw new realities toward her. Each gratitude entry felt like opening an invisible door. Life didn't return to normal in an instant, but things began aligning, piece by piece, day by day. Small daily victories became nourishment for her soul. She learned to give thanks before seeing the outcome, and this simple shift transformed the way she faced challenges. Mornings began to have meaning again. The warmth of her coffee felt like a gentle beginning, and the reflection in the mirror no longer showed just exhaustion, there was a quiet strength, a calm confidence. The bills were still there, the debts were still real, and uncertainty still existed, but now, so did faith. And faith, she discovered, is the seed of abundance. With every step she took, life seemed to give something back. The universe, once silent, now spoke through the smallest of details, and she had finally learned how to listen. The days turned into weeks, and her energy was no longer the same. What had once been fear was now serenity. What had once been despair became trust. Nothing extraordinary had happened on the outside, the extraordinary was happening inside her. The water boiling for coffee seemed warmer, the smell of fresh bread richer, the sound of birds clearer. It felt as though the universe, slowly and gently, had begun to speak to her again, not through words, but through signs. Opportunities began to appear from places she never would have expected. A simple invitation to a small meeting opened doors she could have never imagined. A modest contract, which seemed insignificant at first, unfolded into a profitable project. An old friend she hadn't seen in years reappeared, and with him came new connections. None of it felt like coincidence. She knew. It was the universe reorganizing itself, responding to the frequency she had finally begun to radiate. And that was when she understood the true essence of the law of attraction. It wasn't just about wanting something, it was about aligning thought, emotion, and action. Thinking positively wasn't enough. She needed to feel the truth of what she wanted and act as someone who already trusted the path ahead. Once she began living in that alignment, the doors opened more naturally. She started behaving differently. Instead of focusing on what was missing, she expressed gratitude for what was arriving. Instead of panicking over deadlines, she would inhale deeply and remind herself, everything happens at the right time. And in that right time, things came. What felt slow before now revealed itself as the universe carefully rearranging circumstances so that everything could fit together in harmony. One morning, as she was writing in the journal, she noticed something she had never seen before. The first pages were filled with requests, pleas, and attempts to control fate. The most recent pages, however, were filled with gratitude and declarations of trust. Without realizing it, she had changed the way she communicated with the universe, and naturally, the universe changed the way it responded to her. The office that once felt empty and silent began to come alive again. The lights returned. The sound of keyboards typing filled the air. And the first team members came back. There were only a few of them, but their presence carried the energy of rebuilding. She welcomed them with a genuine smile, the smile of someone who knows the worst has already passed. The debts slowly began to shrink. The workflow increased. And confidence, once shattered, returned stronger than it had ever been. She realized the universe hadn't taken anything from her. It had simply invited her to become someone new, someone more aware, more grateful, more connected. For the first time since everything had fallen apart, she felt that destiny was no longer working against her. It was beside her, walking with her, waiting for her to keep believing. The rebuilding didn't happen through a single grand gesture, but through a series of small, intentional choices made day after day. Each calm decision, each word spoken with faith, each action guided by a clear intention was a seed planted in the fertile soil of this new season. She learned that starting over doesn't mean running, it means walking with awareness. It's not about trying to control the future, it's about aligning with the certainty that the future is being prepared with care. The office continued to transform. The walls that once held silence now carried laughter, ideas, and conversations about projects that would have seemed impossible only months before. The smell of fresh coffee blended with the vibrant energy of new beginnings, and every employee who returned brought with them a spark of hope. She watched it all with a full heart, not full of pride, but full of gratitude. She knew how much each step had cost, and now, every accomplishment had a deeper, more grounded meaning. Partnerships began to bloom again. Companies that had once stepped away returned, seeking her services once more, and new clients appeared as a direct response to the energy she was now radiating. Money, which had once been a source of fear, began to flow naturally. It felt as though the universe was returning, in abundance, everything she had finally learned to offer with faith. This time, she understood the cycle. whatever we offer to the world returns multiplied. One afternoon, as she watched her team gathered together, she noticed that she was no longer driven by the need to prove her worth. The fear of failing had been replaced by the joy of contributing. She realized that real success isn't measured only in profit, but in the peace that comes when the mind and the heart begin moving in the same direction. During this time, she decided to promote a few of the people who had stayed with her through the hardest days. She wanted to return loyalty with opportunity. One of them cried upon receiving the new role, and that simple moment reminded her of who she had always been, a woman guided by purpose rather than ego. The journal remained on her desk, now filled with pages of writing. The words inside were no longer only records of pain or survival, but living testimonies of transformation. Each page held the everyday miracles, an unexpected payment, a prosperous partnership, a sincere compliment, a peaceful day. She wrote from the heart, and each line reminded her that everything created outside begins within. The company, now renewed, reflected what she herself had become. It was no longer just a business that prospered, it was the external expression of a soul aligned with the flow of abundance. And within this new rhythm, she began to understand something even greater: the universe was not rewarding her. It was simply returning what she had finally allowed herself to vibrate: gratitude, trust, and love. Time passed, and what once seemed impossible became her everyday reality. The office was no longer the same, it was larger now, brighter, filled with movement. The blended voices of the team formed a soft symphony of productivity and joy. The life that once felt like it was collapsing now bloomed before her like a garden reborn after a storm. But what touched her most was not the numbers rising on spreadsheets, it was the feeling of peace. That quiet peace that comes when the soul understands its own power to create reality. One morning, while observing her team at work, she decided to share what she had learned. She gathered everyone in the main room and, holding the journal in her hands, told her story, without hiding the pain and without romanticizing the fall. She spoke about the day she thought everything was over, about the woman at the market, and about the words that changed everything: gratitude is the miracle that keeps the universe in motion. The room fell into attentive silence. No one knew how deep that journey had been. She explained, with calm certainty, what she called the triad of transformation: to think, to feel, and to act. She said that the mind creates the vision, the heart sends the energy, and the actions open the path. That there is no point in wishing for abundance if, inside, we are still vibrating fear, guilt, or doubt. The universe, she said, does not read words, it reads frequency. The team listened quietly, some with tears in their eyes, others lost in reflection over their own battles. She continued, sharing how she learned to be grateful before the blessings arrived, and how she discovered that every thought is a seed that returns bearing fruit of the same nature. When I vibrated scarcity, the universe responded with more lack. When I began to vibrate gratitude, it responded with abundance. From that day on, something shifted within the company as well. Meetings began with 1 minute of gratitude. Goals were written alongside positive affirmations. The atmosphere grew lighter, and people began attracting opportunities, solutions, and ideas with greater ease. What started as a simple explanation became culture, a way of working and living. She realized that teaching what she had learned was also a form of gratitude. And the more she shared, the more the universe returned. New projects appeared, partnerships strengthened, and the company's name began being highlighted in industry events and magazines. It was the physical expression of something she now understood deeply: everything you believe in, feel with truth, and honor with constancy multiplies. And as success began to grow again, she understood, it wasn't only the result of effort, but of alignment. It was the reflection of someone who had learned to trust. As months passed, her life transformed into something that went far beyond any business plan. Opportunities expanded in scale and depth. International projects arrived, and invitations for interviews and talks multiplied. People wanted to hear her story, to understand how someone who had once stood on the edge of collapse rebuilt not only a company, but her own essence. She stood on stages in front of hundreds and spoke with serenity. There was no showmanship or easy promises, only truth. She spoke about the darkest days, the sleepless nights, and the morning when a woman handed her a simple journal and said, "Gratitude is the miracle that keeps the universe in motion." She explained that this phrase was the turning point, the seed that took root even in the soil of pain. And the audience listened with glassy eyes, recognizing in her story pieces of their own. Yet, no matter how great the success became, she never forgot where the shift had begun. And one late afternoon, while turning the pages of her journal now filled from edge to edge, a memory rose gently in her mind, the face of the woman from the market. She hadn't seen her in a long time, but she felt a quiet pull to find her again. She got in the car and drove back to the old neighborhood, her heart beating faster with every turn, guided by the unmistakable intuition that there was something still unfinished. When she arrived, the market seemed smaller than before. She asked a few vendors and learned that the woman still lived nearby, in a small, simple house surrounded by rose bushes and old windows. She knocked, her heart pounding. When the door opened, the same calm smile greeted her, as if the woman had been expecting her. They talked for hours. The woman shared that life had been difficult, that her home was about to be taken by the bank due to an old mortgage. She listened quietly, her eyes filling with tears. That woman had given her the greatest gift of her life, and now the universe was giving her the chance to give back. The next day, she quietly paid off the entire debt. She didn't say a word. She simply left a note at the door, along with a bouquet of fresh flowers. "What you once taught me changed everything. Now the universe is returning the gift. Gratitude is the miracle that keeps the universe in motion." The woman read the note, looked up at the sky, and smiled. She knew the cycle was complete. And in that moment, as the breeze moved softly through the street, she understood something profound. True gratitude doesn't end, it simply changes direction. After that encounter, something shifted inside her for good. It wasn't just the relief of having done something kind. It was a deep understanding of how the energy of the universe moves, a constant flow of giving and receiving. That simple act, done quietly and guided only by the heart, felt like it had opened a new portal of abundance. In the days that followed, everything began to flow with even more ease. Contracts multiplied, opportunities found their way to her naturally, and life seemed to move in perfect harmony. But more than the external results, what transformed her the most was how she felt on the inside. She realized that true prosperity had never been in her bank account, but in the peace of waking up without fear. The money returned, yes, and abundantly, but it was no longer the source of her security. It was simply the consequence of a fullness that no crisis could ever take away. Her mornings took on a new rhythm. She began waking before sunrise, preparing her own coffee, and before anything else, opening her journal. She wrote slowly now, not to ask, but to give thanks. With each sentence, she reaffirmed what she had learned: the universe is a faithful mirror of what we feel. If we vibrate fear, it reflects scarcity. If we vibrate gratitude, it responds with miracles. During the talks she began to give, she shared this principle with simplicity and depth. She said that the secret was not to want, but to feel the desire as if it had already come to life. That the universe responds to the vibration of love, not the noise of desperation. And that gratitude is the purest form of faith, because it is saying, "Thank you," before the miracle arrives. Over time, people began to see her as more than a successful entrepreneur. They saw in her a guide, a living example that it is possible to rebuild everything, so long as the transformation begins within. Letters began to arrive from people who said her words had helped them believe again. And each message was another confirmation that her purpose had grown far beyond business. One night, as she stood on her balcony watching the horizon, the wind moved with the same gentle softness as that day at the market. And she understood, everything the universe does happens in perfect cycles. The woman at the market, the journal, the collapse, the healing, none of it was coincidence. Every moment was part of a larger orchestration, each note necessary to compose the melody of her new life. With a steady heart, she smiled, knowing that the universe never fails. It simply waits for us to be ready to understand the meaning behind each piece of the journey. The success that once felt personal had now become purpose. After all she had learned, she knew that the cycle of giving was not yet complete. Helping the woman from the market had awakened a new awareness within her. The true essence of abundance is to share it. And so the idea began to grow, to create something bigger, something that could carry this same power of transformation to others who, just like her, once stood on the edge of giving up. The project began simply, almost shyly, monthly gatherings to talk about gratitude, positive mindset, and new beginnings. The room was small, but the energy was immense. The first people who arrived came with lowered heads, carrying stories of loss, debt, and disappointment. She welcomed them with the same serene smile that, one day, she had received from the woman at the market, offering not just words, but the living example of someone who had walked from the lowest point to the summit of faith. As the months passed, the group grew. People from other cities began to show up. What had started as a small gathering slowly became a human development institute dedicated to teaching the principles of gratitude, the law of attraction, and the power of aligning thought, emotion, and action. She didn't speak about magic formulas, she spoke about awareness, about the invisible strength that rises when the heart and mind learn to work together. The journal that had once been handed to her now sat displayed inside a glass case in the Institute's main hall. Not as a trophy, but as a symbol of the power of small things. Beneath it, a plaque read the sentence that had changed her life: "Gratitude is the miracle that keeps the universe in motion." The lectures grew larger. The stories of transformation multiplied. People who had lost everything began to rebuild their lives. Others who had lived in fear learned to trust again. What she had once discovered inside herself was now flourishing in hundreds of other souls. Once, a young woman approached her at the end of one of the gatherings, tears streaming down her face, and said, "You have no idea how much your words helped me. I was about to give up." She embraced her and answered simply, "I know. I have been there too." And in that moment, she understood that her mission had fulfilled its purpose. The universe had not made her lose everything to punish her, but to prepare her. Every fall had been a lesson, every pain, a nudge toward a greater calling. And now, seeing so many lives being transformed, she understood, none of it had been in vain. The gratitude that once saved her life was now saving others. And the cycle continued, infinite, perfect, moved by the same force that has always guided the universe, love in the form of faith. As the years went by, her name began to spread far beyond her city. Lectures that once gathered dozens now filled auditoriums and theaters. Magazines, TV programs, and news outlets wanted to share her story. Headlines told of the entrepreneur who overcame collapse through the power of gratitude, but those who knew her closely understood, the real power was not in overcoming, but in transforming from within. She was invited to international events, sharing the stage with people she had once seen only on television. And even among applause and lights, she remained serene. She did not seek fame, she sought purpose. Each interview was an opportunity to spread the message she carried in her heart: everything you experience is a reflection of what you vibrate. Change what you feel, and the universe will change what you see. In one of her most memorable interviews, the host asked her what the secret to success was. She smiled and answered gently. Gratitude. Not the gratitude you feel when everything is going right. I'm talking about the gratitude that is born in the middle of pain, when there is still no sign of a way out. That is the force that changes everything. The studio fell silent for a few seconds, and in that moment, Everyone understood that her words came from a place of truth. Even with the prestige and recognition, she remained faithful to her roots. She still lived in the same house, drank the same morning coffee, and wrote in the same journal. The travels, the awards, and the honors never changed her essence. She continued to wake up early, open the windows, and whisper softly, "Thank you, universe, for another day." The institute grew, gained new spaces and new voices, but she always made a point to be present at the first gatherings of every new group. She liked to look into people's eyes and remind herself that everything had begun with a single seed, a simple woman, an ordinary marketplace, and an act of love. There were days when the pace was intense, but she never neglected her sacred pauses, sunset walks, journal entries, and silent conversations with the universe. It was in those moments that she reconnected with the source of everything, the place where her strength was born. And somehow, the more she shared, the more the universe blessed her. She understood that recognition was not the end of the path, but a confirmation that she was following the right purpose. Because when the mission is true, success stops being the goal, and becomes the natural outcome. She was living proof that the universe rewards those who choose to believe, even when everything seems lost. Over time, people no longer sought her out just out of curiosity, but out of a genuine need for hope. There was something in her presence that transmitted calm, something in her eyes that said, "You can do this too." She realized her story had become a mirror for thousands of people around the world, people who, just like she once had, felt lost, tired, and without faith. And that's when she understood that true success isn't about being admired, it's about being useful. Her lectures began to take on a new tone. They were no longer just motivational speeches, but soul gatherings. She spoke about prosperity, yes, but always reminded everyone that abundance is not about having a lot, it's about knowing that what you have is already enough. She taught that gratitude is not a technique, but a state of being. And that the law of attraction does not work for those who want selfishly, but for those who vibrate in love, faith, and purpose. Crowds listened in silence, and many cried. Not because of her words, but because of the energy that carried them. There was truth in her voice, and people recognize when something comes from the heart. She told the story of the day everything collapsed, about the fear, the despair, and the journal given by a stranger in the marketplace. She said that simple gesture was the reminder that the universe never forgets us, it only waits for us to believe again. As the institute expanded, she began to create social projects. She visited underserved communities, bringing free workshops on positive mindset and conscious prosperity. She wanted to show that the power of transformation doesn't belong to a few, it is a universal force, accessible to everyone. Each workshop, each group, each smile returned was another way to give back what she had received. Time seemed to move differently in this phase of her life. The travels no longer exhausted her. The commitments no longer weighed on her. There was meaning in everything. It was as if the universe had put everything into place so she could serve. Life, which once seemed to be falling apart, now rested on a solid foundation, gratitude, faith, and love. And between one lecture and the next, she always reserved a moment just for herself, the silent ritual of opening her journal and writing the 3 sentences that had become her daily prayer. I am grateful for everything I have lived. I am grateful for everything I am living now. I am grateful for everything that is already on its way. These words were a constant reminder that the universe does not reward force or urgency, but true surrender. And it was in this state of surrender that she began to inspire multitudes. Not because she taught techniques, but because she lived what she spoke. And that coherence was the greatest proof that gratitude, when lived deeply, has the power to transform any destiny. That night seemed ordinary, but something in the air suggested it would be different. The auditorium was full, more than 2,000 people from many different countries. The international event on consciousness and prosperity was taking place in a large convention center, and she was the keynote speaker. As she waited backstage, she could hear the soft hum of the audience, the clicking of cameras, the blend of foreign voices. She took a slow breath and smiled. She still felt the same flutter in her chest she had felt in the beginning, but now that flutter reminded her that she was alive, present, and connected. When she stepped onto the stage, the lights dimmed and a warm golden spotlight framed her silhouette. She stood in silence for a few seconds, looking at the sea of faces in front of her. And then she began. A few years ago, I was standing on the edge of bankruptcy. I had lost my business, my friends, and my faith. I thought it was the end, but the universe was only teaching me how to begin again. The room fell into complete stillness. With a steady voice, she shared her story the way she always did, without rushing, without embellishing, just truth. She spoke of the fear, the emptiness, and the nights when she thought she would never recover. And then she spoke of the day she received a simple brown journal and a sentence that changed everything: gratitude is the miracle that keeps the universe in motion. She said that from that moment forward, she learned that the universe never fails, it simply responds to the frequency we emit. As she spoke, she looked out into the audience and saw tears, smiles, and eyes lit with recognition. People of different languages and cultures understood every word, because gratitude is a universal language. And in that moment, she realized that her purpose had crossed borders. It was no longer just a story of survival, it was a living message, a reminder that every one of us holds the power to rewrite our destiny. At the end of the lecture, the entire audience rose to their feet in applause. She remained still, receiving that sound as a blessing. She didn't feel like a star, she felt like a part of something far greater, the infinite cycle of gratitude. A cycle that began with a simple woman in a neighborhood market and was now touching hearts across the world. When she stepped off the stage, a young journalist approached her and asked, "After everything you've lived, what do you believe is the secret of the universe?" She smiled, looked upward for a brief moment, and replied, "The secret is simple: whatever you give, the universe returns. Whatever you vibrate, it shapes into form. So be grateful, even when you don't understand the reason yet." The answer echoed like a mantra. The journalist's eyes filled with tears. "You changed the way I see life," she said softly. She placed her hand over her heart and replied, "It wasn't me. It was gratitude. She is the one who moves everything." And in that moment, while the applause still echoed through the room, she felt the same soft breeze from the very first day, the same gentle whisper that found her in the marketplace. It was the universe reminding her that the cycle continues, and that gratitude, when it is true, never ends. After that night, she returned home in silence. There was no celebration, no noise, just the quiet sound of her own heartbeat. She left her shoes by the door, turned on a warm light, and walked to her desk. The journal was there, in the same place as always, its edges worn, carrying the faint scent of time and paper. She rested her hand on the cover and closed her eyes for a moment. So many written pages, so many words, so many rebeginnings. Each line was a reminder that the universe never forgets those who choose to believe. She opened to the very first page and read again the sentence that changed everything: gratitude is the miracle that keeps the universe in motion. Her eyes filled with tears. Because now, she understood. The universe does not move outside of us, it moves through us. Every thought, every emotion, every gesture is a frequency that travels into the unseen and returns multiplied. It is a constant dialogue between who we are and who we are becoming. She sat down, picked up a pen, and wrote, "Today, I understand that the universe never took anything from me, it simply returned me to myself." And when she finished the sentence, she smiled. Not a smile of triumph, but a smile of peace. Because true abundance is not about achieving, it is about understanding. It is not about having everything, but about being everything the soul has always been: faith, love, and gratitude. She knew that her story had reached the world, but she also knew that it wasn't the end. With every person who was touched, a new story was beginning. Somewhere, someone would hear her words and decide to try again. And perhaps, the universe was already preparing another meeting, another journal, another miracle disguised as coincidence. And now, the one hearing this story carries a piece of it too. Because the power that transformed her lives inside each of us. The universe does not choose favorites, it responds to the vibration of those who believe. And if you have made it this far, maybe this is your moment to begin again. If this story touched your heart, write the word gratitude in the comments. This is how the cycle continues, one word at a time, one soul awakening another. Subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the next stories, and share this video with someone who needs to remember that the universe is still working quietly on their behalf. And always remember, the universe is never late, it simply waits for the moment when you choose to believe again. Gratitude. Always.